Welcome back, sports medicine fans, to episode 70 of the Sports Medicine Project. Got a very interesting, very insightful episode coming this week, but really bad news, the worst news of the podcast so far. Kelly is sick. She's here with me now. She's sick. It's going to be a short little intro because usually...
You don't have much of a voice.
Yeah,
though.
she's gone. The moneymaker is gone. Man, we don't pay any insurance or anything for your voice. There was no way I could foresee this happening. I never thought this would ever be an issue. Like, you've been sick before. We've recorded this podcast through sickness. But this time...
Yeah, this podcast is only going to go up from here, though, because this was one of my favourites, I think, with Alex.
Yeah.
He's just a down-to-earth, awesome guy.
Yeah.
I really love talking to him and got so much out of the podcast, and I think you guys will love it. So rest assured, the crappy voice on our end does not carry through to the podcast with Alex.
No, definitely not. Now, for those of you who don't know who Alex is, Alex Bell from The Running Room, and he introduces himself at the start of the episode, but he was the physio, the man that very much helped Ned Brockmann run from Perth all the way to Sydney. Yeah, that was... there was a couple of things that I thought for sure he would have said that would have happened that didn't at all. And it was insightful to hear him talk about just really patching up. I mean, it's so opposite to what we would do in the clinic. Yeah. Like, you're really just trying to get this person who is breaking down to not break down. You're so close to the end.
And so much education. Well, this probably isn't too different to what we do day to day, but he really emphasised how important education and reassurance was at various points throughout the adventure, I guess. And that carries through to clinical life as well. Education is paramount.
Yeah, certainly. It's interesting. I think that he would just be the nicest guy. I'm trying to imagine him, because we've talked a little bit through Instagram, and like seeing him face to face, or not face to face, Zoom to Zoom, with him speaking. I just imagine him with his patients, just really calm and just developing like the best patient practitioner alliance, because he would just great education, calmness, just has this sense of, portrays this sense of confidence, and the patient's like, I just feel better speaking about this with you. Yeah, nice guy. And so lovely of him to donate the time. Anything that stood out for you? Anything interesting? I wanted to ask around like shoes and orthotics and braces and taping and that. And yeah, I was happy to have that answered. I was surprised at the answer, so it was good. Anything?
I enjoyed all of it. There was so many moments. I was like, that's so cool. I feel so lucky to be able to talk to you and pick your brain about these things, because it's just like, so for those of you who don't know Ned Brockmann, you're crazy for a start. But secondly, Ned Brockmann ran from Perth to Bondi. So I'm sure majority of people listening to this podcast know who Ned Brockmann is. Super inspiring.
Did you hear me explain that?
Did you?
Like 45 seconds ago.
Did you?
I just said to those who don't know who Alex or Ned is, and then explained it.
Oh, sorry.
That's all right. No, repetition. That's
sick
all right.
Brain.
That is not sick brain at all. That happens. No, it's good. It's fine. Yeah, as you were saying to me to cut me off there.
I don't know.
Who Ned was. Run from Perth to Sydney. Yeah. Crazy not to know him.
100 kilometres a day, pretty much.
And at a pretty decent pace too.
Yeah.
Pretty decent pace.
And raising money for We Are Mobilised, which apparently the link is still up if anyone wanted to go donate to that still, which is raising money for homelessness.
Yeah.
I've lost my train of thought. I don't know where I was going with that. It's
clogged. It's full of mucus. How much does this make you appreciate when you're not sick?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah. Especially when you're trying to sleep and your head just feels like it's going to explode.
Would you rather this mucusy sickness or ITB syndrome or heel pain or an injury? What do you think?
Sick, because it only lasts a couple of days.
Yeah, that's true.
I already feel like I'm on the way out.
Yeah. Other news as well, if you're listening to this, and I'm assuming we get a couple hundred that listen in the first half of the day, and that's going to be you lucky guys and girls. If you want to listen to myself talk about plantar heel pain, it's management, risk factors, just really pain in general, we are doing a free webinar with Learning Physiotherapy. Look them up on Instagram. I've shared plenty of it on our socials, but it's a free webinar, about 45 minutes, 15 minutes of questioning, and it should be really good. I spent the last week really trying to work out, I guess, the clinical translation, the research translation to clinical practice, and I think it will be good. And it's free, so if you don't enjoy it, you really just lost 45 minutes of your life. You don't lose any money, but I think you will enjoy it. It's pretty good. Put some memes in there, which should be good.
You love a meme.
Yeah, I think that it's engaging for people because they see that and they're like, oh, that's kind of half funny, or it feels really relatable because there's only a really small part of the population that are going to get that meme. You know, the physio memes and some of the memes that we put up, they're really specific to physio, like getting swamped by a note or someone trying to palpate their sacroiliac joint. And you're like, oh, that's really cool because only I get that, and hopefully it's a little bit funny. Yeah, it was good. How was your week last week?
Can't remember.
Can't remember anything before right now.
No.
Been good.
You?
Yeah, it was a pretty good week. It's been busy. What was something interesting?
Oh, I remember what was good.
What was it?
Recording that podcast with Ebony Rio.
Yeah.
Was freaking awesome.
Yeah, she was good. She was really
Coming
good.
soon.
Yeah, that'll be out in the next couple of weeks. The thing I took from that, and then I'm just about to read the paper, and it's going to be in the research review, is the study that Lorimer Moseley did, which I've heard people talk about. What do patients want from the consult? You know, what are the things that you should try to answer? Number one, what's wrong with me? Number two, how long will it take to get better? Number three, what can I, the patient, do for it? And also, number four, what can you, the health practitioner, do for it? I thought that was pretty good. I mean, they're pretty simple and easy, and we probably all, to some degree, answer those questions, but I was thinking where that might be relevant right at the end of a consult when you know that that's going to be the last thing they remember. Just quickly running through this and going, great.
That's pretty much what makes up our management plan.
Management plan, yeah. And I guess you could put that into your management plan. Like, great, plantar heel pain, 3 to 12 months roughly. What can you do for it? That's a huge time frame, I know. You know, you can move, resistance training, do the things you love to do with a bit of safety that pain's okay. And what can I, the health practitioner, do for it? We can tape and braces and insoles and heel lifts and resistance training and footwear and those kind of things. So I thought that was pretty interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I enjoyed that. And obviously you heard just talking about tendons as well. Did you find, because you wanted to ask around the patella tendon, do you find you got that answered? It was like, why did patella tendinopathy only happen in strong people? But it was a bit of a backwards answer or something?
No, it was good. I mean, that was brief, but that's because we were coming to the end of our podcast, and I was also running out, and I was driving home and going in and out of service, so I missed part of the answer for it, so I couldn't really elaborate on what she'd said or ask a follow-up question, but that I still got stuff out of it, and I think everyone else will too.
Yeah, that's good. Next week's research review, sign up on our Instagram, or I think the link will be in the show notes as well. There was a really cool systematic review, and it triggered my memory, and we'll speak about Ebony, that come out talking about, which has been a bit of the rage the last couple of maybe several months, talking about if we need to get tendons stronger to get better. And this new systematic review, which is titled, Can We Really Say Getting Stronger Makes Your Tendon Feel Better? And they concluded that no studies explored the relationship between changes in tendon pain and disability and changes in muscle structure and function. And when we asked Ebony about this, I thought it was pretty cool. I'm going to try and talk about it with a couple of patients tomorrow, what changes for us to get better, or if someone goes, great, what are we working on with this resistance training, and trying to give an evidence-based answer. Ebony said something interesting where she said tendons take a long time to change. They could be months, whereas muscles could change a little bit earlier, which could be weeks, and the neural drive could change pretty quickly, which could be a couple of days or weeks as well, and they all kind of blend together. So for someone with Achilles tendinopathy or patella tendinopathy or a glute tendinopathy, you're giving them some resistance training, yes, the tendon may change 6 months from now structurally. Earlier than that, the muscle may change, but in the short term, in the first couple of weeks, when they start to feel better, they may get stronger if you're testing them objectively, but it may not be the actual structural changes to the tendon or the muscle. It's that neural drive.
Everything's just habituation, isn't it?
Yeah. I can't remember. She did explain it really cool how
She
the
explains
connections.
everything so well.
I know. I wish we were like, that's so good. So good.
One day we'll get there. We just need to keep talking about it.
I feel like I got to talk about her for the next 20 years and maybe, but yeah, she was lovely. And just, I'm at the end, and she said this offline, because she's been on lots of podcasts and I've seen her speak a couple of times. She said that she's just so happy to get in front of an audience, talk on podcasts, help clinicians understand tendons and really just musculoskeletal sports medicine management as much as she can. She goes, I'm happy to just jump on a podcast. I don't want any money. I just want to help and try and help patients and help clinicians understand it better. Yeah, she's just a lovely, really lovely, down-to-earth person. Yeah.
I've got a question for you.
Oh, yeah? Hit me.
We've got Newey Half Marathon this weekend.
Yeah.
What's your taper week look like? Not like specifics, but just general concepts or principles in what you're doing this week to try and freshen the body up and get yourself ready for a sub 90
for the sub 90. Well, I've got a navicular stress fracture at the moment, so I'm just going to try and shockwave it and tape it. I don't know, my taper week...
Sarcasm for those of you who don't know.
The start of this presentation tomorrow, I don't think I told you this. It's the first time I've ever said it publicly. The second slide of the presentation, when I introduce myself and who I am and what I do, I say, and you can see it in the word, I say, I'm a really sarcastic guy with dry humour. So, because I've seen this online as well, where I've posted something that I'm like, surely people know this is sarcastic, or I'm having a dig, and people are like, are you fucking serious? Like if I'm posting something about the big toe and the hip or something funny or sharing something, and I'm like, that's right. For people that know me, know that I can be very sarcastic. But people that don't know me, which is a lot of people now through the podcast and Instagram, like, that's right. They could probably think that this is serious. Anyway, so yeah, for the taper, I want to try and run. I want my Strava to look good because it's looking really consistent. So I want to try, if I do the half on Sunday plus a warm up, it'll be about 22, 23k. So I think, great, if on Sunday I do that, I want to try and run 70Ks this week. I need to run 50Ks Monday to Saturday. So my Strava still looks nice and consistent. But I don't know if that's that smart. I should have a down week.
Yeah. What's more important, doing a good run on Sunday or the Strava graph?
Well, it's a B race for me, I think. But yeah, you're having a good race because I'm pretty confident I can do 90 minutes.
You don't need to run 80Ks. You can just dip it down a bit and it'll look pretty fresh.
Up. Yeah. I don't think... I was going to ask you this before. I don't think there's any paces. Because I had a pacer for the last 90.
Oh, I think there might be.
There might be. Because this one's way bigger. They sold out. For anyone that doesn't know, Newcastle... I wouldn't say it's a big running town. We don't have any...
I reckon it's a pretty big running community here.
Yeah. I mean, we don't have really any kind of, like Melbourne Track Club or Team Tempo Run or... We don't really have... We've got MWLR, which is a run club that Kelly and I started with 5 people if you want to come and join.
Newcastle Flyers as well.
Yeah, the Flyers and Run Lab. Yeah, that's true. But, yeah... Wooters, yeah. Okay, you got me there.
Stroke No Limits.
Yeah, that's true as well. Another one. There's heaps of run clubs.
Newcastle Runners.
Yeah, okay. Now you're just naming run clubs. But I think Monday, today, 12K, easy. So my easy pace is like 4-minute Ks. I just... low heart rate, and then because my threshold is like 250s. I think I'll try and do a session sometime this week. I think I'll do 5 minutes, 4 minutes, 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 1 minute.
Why?
I just thought it sounded cool. Do you think that's too much? Adha, what do you think? Maybe 5 minutes, 3 minutes, 1 minute. I might ask Nida.
I think only 20,
Clark,
like on Tuesday, 20 minutes in total of your half marathon pace.
Yeah, right, I can do that. Maybe just 20-minute threshold. Nah, 2x10, 5 off.
Oh, that would actually be pretty similar to what you said.
Yeah, 2x10, 5 off. 2 warm up, 2 cool down.
Off, maybe.
What about 10, 7, 2, 1? I don't know, whatever. I don't even know about the programming. I'll probably just do 3x2K because that's my favourite session. Did I tell you what I did on Saturday? I did 3x3K. I just don't know what else
That's
to do.
so long.
Yeah,
That's
it is
not
long.
fun.
But that pace is feeling more comfortable. I was thinking this the other day. One of the best things, 2 things that I've done for my running, 3 things that I've done for my running that have been the best thing in the last several months. Number 1 was reading the book Training for the Uphill Athlete. That was awesome. Number 2 was going down with Sophie Lane from Stronger Stride down in Sydney. We both went down and did the testing at NSW Fitness, like the lactate and the VO2 to get the numbers, because I've just been following that like a book. Number 3 was just being consistent, because running is the best. Been consistent. Yeah, this is the best it's ever felt, and it's just been really easy. Not that many sessions, and I certainly could have performed better if I'd done more sessions, but running's just been fun at the moment. So those 3 things have certainly helped me quite a lot. And on the weekend, I'm just happy to go on, because we're running with like 10 people.
Yes.
I'm just excited to do that. And then it makes me think of why, bringing it back to the clinical life, for people that have their meaningful activity and pain is the barrier for them to do that, how it can have such an impact on their life. Like if I woke up tomorrow with an injury and I can only run 20 or 30 kilometers, mentally I would struggle, and physically I would as well. I would be more tired.
In the week, do you mean?
Yeah. And I think of the people that come to see us, although yes, pain is the reason behind that, there's a lot of things that pain is stopping them from doing and being able to engage in, both physical and mental. And it's pretty cool that we get to be the people to help them get back to that. Yeah, I thought that was a nice way to end it. We'll finish episode 70 there. Enjoy this episode with Alex Bell talking about the journey of Ned Brockmann from Perth to Sydney. It's bloody awesome. And talk to you guys next week.
Bye. Alrighty, so welcome back to another episode of the Sports Medicine Project. A long-awaited guest we have with us today. We have Alex Bell joining us from the running room, and who was the physiotherapist to a person that I think everyone in Australia and probably a lot of people around the world now know by the name of Ned Brockmann, who ran from Perth to Bondi towards the end of last year, which was an absolutely incredible thing to experience. We were living through his sort of Strava and Instagram journeys, and yours too, Alex. So thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, thank you. Thanks for having me. I'm excited for this one. Very excited for this one.
Thank you. And so tell us about yourself, your workplace, how you sort of got started on the journey with Ned.
Yeah, absolutely. So I'm a physio. I primarily treat runners now, but really our clinic, I founded a clinic called the Running Room. So we've got 3 locations here in Sydney and then 1 in London. And really the goal of our clinics was to bring some elite level of technology into the everyday setting. So bring some things that traditionally you might see in universities or research labs. And so the crux of what we do is use an instrumented treadmill. So a treadmill with a pressure plate under the belt to accurately assess some of the loads and the demands that go through the body when someone runs. And yeah, it's been hugely successful here in Australia and in London. We don't just treat runners, like we treat anyone who loves to move, whether that's, a runner or someone who loves to play sport, gym, swim, whatever it is. That's kind of that was the goal of why I started the Running Room. I got introduced to Ned a couple of years back now, and this story probably starts with him as he was embarking on running the 50 marathons in 50 days, which is crazy to even think that he was able to achieve that as well, particularly with someone who doesn't really have a huge background of running. He wasn't always a runner. He rode through high school and played some rugby, but was never considered himself as a runner. And so based in the eastern suburbs of Sydney at our main clinic in Clovelly, he lives in Randwick. He was embarking on this 50 and 50, and And we just reached out and said, I knew of him through the running community, and we do a lot of work with the running community down here. And I just said, hey, mate, if you need any help going through this, just hit me up. And it was really funny. He came into the clinic and we just sort of built this relationship. And I'd say, we're probably more friends now than that patient therapist kind of relationship. So it started there, and then we've been treating him over the last couple of years. He's had some niggles and injuries that we've kind of guided him through, and it kind of all took us to him breaking the news to us that he sat down and we had a coffee, and he said, hey, I'm going to run across the country after the 50 and 50. And I thought, wow, one, that's crazy, but also, it's Ned Brockmann, and probably knew pretty early on when I met him that he was a special human. He's a young dude, and he's probably 22 at the time when he ran that 50 and 50, but super mature, got a good head on his shoulders, and just an incredible human.
Just imagine if you were, you're sitting there with a patient talking about the importance of load, and they're like, hey, I've been slowly building up and I'm just going to go run 5,000 Ks. Is that okay?
Yeah, mate. Crazy to think. And even the 50 and 50 was the same, right? Him coming off not even really being a runner and then saying, oh yeah, I'm going to run 50 marathons in 50 days. And, as a therapist, our alarm bells start going off when we think about good load management and the principles around that. And so it quickly turned into, well, how can we best manage him? He's going to do it anyway. How can we best manage him? We probably didn't have time at that point. I started treating him during the 50 and 50s. And so, that kind of building tissue capacity kind of goes out the window at that point. It's more about how can we keep him running and keep him in the best shape possible. So, it's been an incredible journey with him.
And so having a bit of time to maybe prepare, I guess, it was in the works for a little while. What did that process look like of the preparation in building to something like that? I can't even imagine. I mean, as you said, the running's almost irrelevant. How do we just keep this person healthy and strong and in the best sort of headspace to be able to manage a big mental challenge like that?
Yeah. So it probably wasn't, when we look back at it, it probably wasn't the most ideal prep for someone who's about to embark on running across the country. He certainly had a good amount of chronic load in the body, but probably battled, I would say, and I think Ned would admit this as well, and we've had good chats about this, where he came out the back of the 50-50. I think it was probably a couple of weeks later. He ran 100 Ks up and down, a famous hill in Sydney. And so it was kind of one of those things where we knew we had to start putting some more structure to his training and start looking at hey, mate, you can't just go rogue here. Just because you got through the 50 and 50 relatively unscathed, you had some Achilles stuff, some hamstring niggles, sort of proximal hamstring tendinopathies, it doesn't mean that you're not going to suffer anything in the future. So we sort of sat down, and I was lucky enough. I worked really closely with a great coach, Matty Abel here in Sydney, who has a coaching business called DBA Runners, and we've got a really good relationship. He's an ultra marathon runner himself. We've got a really good relationship and a really good open line of communication. I love the fact that Matty's really invested in the data and loves to really program based off that. So I said, hey, let's sit down, let's introduce you to Matty, and let's start coming up with a decent plan to try and get you across the country and, put some structure in this at a really early stage. So we did that. Ned, probably before we introduced him to Matty, had started, really increasing his running again, and suffered from some IT band issues. He had a cortisone, probably didn't let it rest enough. It had good effect, but then we probably went back too quickly, and it just flared back up. He ended up having a lateral release. And so this was, which actually was really positive. It actually helped a huge amount. And then as we started getting back into some load, he, struggled with some bone stress in the tibia. And so he was kind of, it wasn't significant enough where we'd really pull him back for a long period of time, but certainly some relative rest and then getting back into things. So that was probably well before we started this block of training for getting him ready to run across the country. And then some things popped up as well. So we had, patellofemoral pain leading into the run that he probably didn't want to vocalize too much in the media, but he was certainly suffering from that, and some mild bone stress after he ran the Gold Coast Marathon. What did he do? He did the double. So he ran the 21 in sub 90 and then backed up the marathon in sub 3 the next day, and suffered probably some bone stress in the weeks after that. And it was sort of mild on MRI, but nothing again. I think that was 7 weeks out from the start of the run. So definitely not the ideal prep. We shifted the focus to really going hard at the S&C component. whilst he was still running, he probably wasn't holding as high a loads as we would have wanted him to.
Yeah,
So
was like there ever the decision to like say we can't do this, especially with a bone stress injury?
No, like it wasn't serious enough in the bone. It was mild. He had some mild sort of bony edema in that kind of cortical layer. It wasn't anything that we would say, hey mate, like this is just not going to happen. And I think for Ned as well, like there was logistical things about a run like this that made it more difficult, even if we were going to push it back. One, I think the thing would be, there's a lot of things in place for him to do the run, but also you leave it any later and the heat starts getting can start getting pretty gnarly, in that part of Australia. So there was it never crossed our mind to not do it. And, I think that Ned certainly knew as well that he had that mental toughness. He'd pushed himself so many times. He was going to get it done at really all costs.
Yeah.
Was there any injuries that you guys had sort of decided prior to the run, like if this pops up, we have to stop, or that didn't even come up either?
No, I wouldn't say. No, I don't think so. Like, that bone stress in the shin. I mean, obviously, if that worsened and got worse on the run, it was always something that we might have said, hey, like, we need to stop at that point. But I certainly wasn't going to vocalize that to Ned, and we were never going to have those discussions until they came up. It was more about what were we going to do when things popped up, and how can we get you in the best shape prior to this run. So he did a really big week. Probably about a month out that we called Hell Week, that was designed by Matty Abel, and I think he did 295 Ks in that week, where he was doing some back-to-back runs and then 200 Ks run at the start of the end of the week, just to try and get his body used to that load, and he actually got through that pretty well. So that I think gave him a lot of confidence being that close to the run, that hey, like the body's okay, the body's all right. And we got another scan on his shin a few weeks out for the run, and that bone stress had really settled down, so I think that gave him a lot of confidence as well.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah. And what about yourself? Did you have to prepare yourself for this journey? And like, I feel like around the decision making that you would have been sort of, making during the run would be different to like acute injuries or seeing runners in the clinic. So how did you prepare yourself from like a physiotherapy perspective?
Yeah, I've done a little bit of work in a totally different capacity, but certainly in that elite sport with Nitro Circus, and really, when those guys are riding and backflipping motorcycles, it's probably less about rehab principles and more about, hey, how can we get you through this, and management. And so probably took some things into that I'd experienced in the past, but certainly I knew there's the rehab principles that we might apply to a tendinopathy or, something in the clinic, or even relative rest, is or decreasing load just wasn't going to happen. So it was certainly more about management and what could we do when things popped up, and how could we, for lack of a better word, provide a Band-Aid solution that would just, be a symptom modifier to try and keep him going. And that's really what we did. So, I mean, the big things for us, it was a heap of hands-on work throughout the run. I would see Ned at 3:30 in the morning before we started, and go through things like taping his feet, work on any niggles that might be present, and of which there were obviously a few, and they were changing day to day. And then we use things like modifying things like heel lifts into the shoe to try and, just change the heel to toe drop and try and offload structures and shift them around. But, with changing one thing comes extra load in another area. So it's very hard to kind of, try and find this sweet spot. But I think we did a pretty good job. But I think also when you're dealing with an athlete like Ned, who's just the most resilient human I've ever met, he's just an absolute warrior, and so it was really the ability for him to push through things, I think, that got him through this run for sure.
Yeah, you mentioned, and this is the one question I'm super interested to hear. You mentioned using heel lifts and shoes. Like, what was the discussion, around footwear? Because especially over that period of time, I mean, surely if you're running that many kilometers, footwear and braces and insoles and things can have a pretty big influence. Was it just like max cushion, or was it carbon plated braces? I think I saw him a couple of times, maybe in an Invincible or something like that. I was always trying to see what he was in, but what was the discussion there? And then follow up to that question, did he wear any orthotics or braces or taping, or what was the plan around that?
Yeah, so certainly we started in like a max cushion shoe with a Met rocker, and it was going pretty well. They did kind of get busted up pretty quickly, so we're changing those shoes pretty quickly, to be honest. And it just depended on the camber of the road. So he would really try and switch sides with the camber. Sometimes we had, a nice wide shoulder where he could run and it was relatively flat, but sometimes the road, had this really extreme camber. So he'd be going from, left side to the right side of the road. And that was
think of that. Yeah.
Oh, it was wild. So sometimes, the shoulder was so small that he was literally kind of running on that fog line. And then when a truck would come, he'd have to get off the gravel. So even that, from a mental perspective, was so difficult for him to navigate. And you just know that obviously the loads there on things like glute tendons and everything, really knees, and when he's running, essentially with that camber, was definitely difficult to navigate. So we started with like a max cushion. The decision to heel lifts was one that was like, I'm not going to say we chop and changed, but certainly he had some Achilles niggles early on that we, thought, hey, let's throw in a heel lift to try and just reduce the load in there. He had that tenosynovitis. And so often when we're putting, trying to address one thing, it might increase the load in another. He had pretty bad patellofemoral pain. And so it's like, cool, do we want to reduce the drop there? Maybe that'll help. But then it would subsequently irritate the Achilles more. So it was kind of like throughout the day, we would just play around with things. It would say, hey, let's remove one. And up to one point, like at some points we had, a 12 mil heel lift in a shoe that might already have, 8 to 10 mil in it. So
that tire.
So it was definitely difficult.
Awesome.
Certainly taping the feet. We trialed as well. When that tenosynovitis flared up, tried to tape his ankle just to try and really give him some stability, but the tendon was so irritated that even any compression through that tendon itself was just making it worse. So we actually shifted, which I don't often do, but we actually shifted to taping it more of like a compressive tape, and just trying to give him something there to provide a little bit of stability. And probably from a bracing perspective, something that I've never used with runners is we use a Dictus band, really, which is used for neurological patients with foot drop. And it's a brace, for any listeners who don't know, a brace that goes around the shin and then attaches to the top of the laces, which aids in dorsiflexion or pulling your ankle up as you sort of push off. And that was something we implemented. It was actually the sports doctor, David Sammer, who said, hey, you can try this. And it probably it did have a good effect after that cortisone, just to, at least help with some of that dorsiflexion.
Can we talk about that tenosynovitis, like the management of what a tenosynovitis would normally be, and then what it was for Ned, the stark contrast?
Yeah, the Brockmann protocol. Yeah. Certainly. So probably start with how I got there day 3, and already Ned's knees were pretty swollen, but I started to notice that, where he started complaining, his kind of, anterior kind of shin pain and also into the foot, kind of around that anterior ankle. And there was definitely some swelling starting to occur there, particularly distally and then even into the foot, sort of around that extensor sort of retinaculum around that area. And so really the management, in the clinic would be, hey, we need to deload this. It was pretty clear that he had some tenosynovitis. Any movement was provocative. It certainly wasn't warming up. It was worse with activity, really tendon palpation. And so normally in the clinic, I'll tell someone to deload. We would potentially, if it was really serious, I might boot them just to really calm it down. I don't do that often, but I have done it before. But for Ned, I was using, and we've spoken about this before, Blake, I was using like a combination of Huradoid and Voltaren.
Yeah.
And just using a cling wrap to try and slow down the absorption is something that we've discussed that Eben Rio really does with more of those paratendon and tenosynovitis type issues. Me and Blake were trying to find, some actual literature on that, and we can't find a lot, but certainly anecdotally, it works a lot in the clinic for me. So I tried to do that, but I think that, it was probably working for the first 3, 4, 5 days. But I think when you're running 100 Ks over and over and over, just, this repetitive load and an already irritated tendon, it just got to the point where Ned lost really the ability to even dorsiflex his foot. So taking off shoes, anytime you would touch that, it was just anytime even taking off the shoe and moving his foot slightly into dorsiflexion or plantar flexion. I can still vividly remember, the piercing screams. It was really, really bad. And it wasn't until probably day 11 where I actually had come home for a few days. And my plan always with this run was to go there, set him up for, the start of the run and then potentially come back at the end. But it was pretty quick once I got back to Sydney that I kind of realized that I probably need to get back out there. I couldn't really sleep. I was waking up at 3 a.m, thinking about what was going on, I was kind of getting phone calls all the time anyway. I just thought, shit, I've got to get back out there, And so, that started day 11 where he actually couldn't run anymore, like couldn't physically run. And I remember this really calm phone call where I spoke to Ned. He was on the road and he was just walking, and he said, mate, I'm just going to walk 100 Ks. And I'm just going to keep walking 100 Ks. And if it takes me all night and all day to do it, I'll just keep going until the wheels fall off. And I truly believe he would have continued to do that had we have not said, mate, we need to stop here. Let's regroup. Let's go get a scan. Because at that point, there was always that thing in the back of our mind too that, hey, potentially he'd done close to 1,100 Ks, like potentially had a bone stress injury in the shin. He did have some tenderness on that, particularly in that distal 1/3 of the tibia as well. And so we probably wanted to rule that out. And I said, hey, let's just stop. Let's get an MRI and let's review, what's actually going on here and formulate a bit of a plan. So it's pretty difficult to get an MRI in the middle of the Nullarbor. They don't quite have them at the Roadhouse there.
Not just coming past it, you can jump in.
No, so I spent probably 4 or 5 hours on the phone, and I distinctly remember I was calling a number of MRI locations around that area, back in South Australia, back in WA. They were kind of at the worst probably point of Australia, right in the middle of Nullarbor. So I called them and they said, yeah, we can get him in. We can get him in a couple of weeks. And it was sort of the conversation quickly became, hey, this is what's happening. This is what this guy is trying to achieve. And so, yeah, they ended up driving 13 hours to get an MRI scan across the Nullarbor into South Australia. And I got on the phone. I've got a really good relationship with Dr. Samara and I, Dr. Dave Samara here in Sydney. And I called him and said, would you do a telehealth and have a look at this scan and potentially recommend a cortisone if there's no bone stress? And he said, yeah, absolutely. So he was really, really good. They drove 13 hours. They got the scan. Dave jumped on as soon as the results came through, had a look, said, yeah, let's go for a cortisone. There's no bone stress. The bone looks really good. And so he had a cortisone immediately following into his tibant and also one of his extensor tendons. And then they drove 13 hours back. Dave's recommendation was, hey, Ned, you should just take it easy over the next few days, let this thing settle. And he said that to me as well. I said, it's just not going to happen, Dave. You don't know this guy. And so 13 hours back, he had 2 hours sleep and then knocked out 100 Ks the next day, which is just incredible to think that anyone can do that. He had the Dictus band on. And yeah, just insane. And he's holding good pace there too. He was running 6-minute pace that next day. And in the 7 days following that cortisone, he ran, I think, 675 Ks in the next 7 days, which is just, mind blowing to think that someone could even do that.
Yeah. How good's cortisone, hey?
Yeah.
So that's the one injection that he had across the rest of the run?
Yeah, it was. Yeah. So we had 2 injections at the same time into those different tendon sheaths. But it certainly settled it down. I wouldn't say it abolished the pain. I think it was a combination of many things. One, Ned's incredible resilience and just ability to push through the most incredible pain. But I think the other thing that probably made a big difference, and something that I think needs to be said, and something that we can do really well as therapists, is just that education piece on, hey, you don't have a bone stress injury here, Ned. Sure, this is going to be extremely painful. Having said that, it's probably not going to do you long-term damage, and you can probably run through this. And I think that knowledge for Ned was really something that he took on, and he was like, all right, cool. I'm just going to push through this, grit the teeth, knowing that he didn't have a bone stress injury. Now, I think the caveat to that is I would never recommend this to a patient of hey, this is the protocol, just run through that. We just never would do that. But I think when you're in the heat of battle and there's an event, particularly like this one where it just wasn't an option to deload him, that was, I think, a really important point, that education of having the scan. And he even said to me, I remember him saying it was really awesome to have that chat with Dr. Samra, who, had said to him, hey, I acknowledge your frustrations here. I acknowledge that, this is really frustrating that your body's letting you down. And even that, he spoke to him in a really calm way, laid out the options. You can either go in a boot and we sell it down or cortisone it. And Ned said, let's cortisone it and push on. I think that, is really the power of communication. Obviously in the clinic, it's far different, but our words really matter. And I think that's, a key takeaway from what I got out of this run as well.
Yeah, that's really, really good advice. Has it changed much of the way that you interact? And I imagine there's archetypes of patients that probably respond better to that kind of information. Has it changed much with you in the clinic? I certainly speak to the resiliency of the body. Has it changed much how you
kind of talk and discuss with people, especially around kind of pain and injury?
I think it's probably changed my perspective of what's possible, knowing that someone was, able to push, through pain day in, day out, especially when that was just one incident. It was probably around 7 to 10 days later where his Achilles, he thought he snapped his Achilles, which he hadn't, but he had, a really severe paratendonitis and irritation of his plantaris tendon. But certainly in the clinic, it's changed what I think is possible and what we can push through. I think more so I wouldn't say necessarily management, because I don't think this is the most ideal management for any of our patients, really. And so the possibility of exploring, pain and what someone can tolerate has definitely been has pushed the threshold of the needle up a little bit. But yeah, I still wouldn't recommend this kind of Ned Brockmann protocol to anyone.
Just go. Great. As long as your leg doesn't feel like it's falling off, just keep going and going and going.